So, good morning again. Welcome everybody to on this cold February Ottawa morning. Welcome to the Standing Committee on International Trade. My name is Mark Ike. I'm the chair. We have three parties on our committee: the Liberals, Conservatives, and the NDP. And we're very fortunate to have the ambassadors from 4 countries with us here this morning, and their staff, supporting staff. As everybody knows, we're doing a study on Canada and Pacific Alliance countries, the future trade agreement. This is probably our 3rd or 4th meeting, and today we're looking very forward to hearing from the ambassadors. We usually only have 5 minutes each presentation, but we're not going to be strict on that. Whatever you feel you have to say, we're going to allow the ambassadors or their support staff to say whatever they want and to be upfront and clear, and then we'll just have dialogue with the MPs and we'll do one round. So, we're going to start off, if the ambassador from Chile is ready, Mr. Mauricio. Go ahead, sir. You have the floor.
Thank you very much. Mr. President, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. Merci beaucoup pour nous avoir invités.
Thank you very much for inviting us today to do this presentation.
For all of us, it's very important to be here sharing with this committee. In my case, I will present the points of view of Chile on a potential agreement between Canada and the Pacific Alliance. And if you allow us, I will make my presentation in English, and then I will be pleased to answer some questions in Spanish if it's okay for you. I'm certain that there will be many coincidences with my fellow ambassadors in this regard. And as ambassador of Chile, I would like to say that we enjoy an excellent relationship with Canada. Politically, we've worked very closely in many areas. In trade, Chile celebrated last year the 20th anniversary of a successful bilateral free trade agreement with Canada. And at that time, we signed its modernization. For Chile, Canada ranked amongst the most important foreign investor in a crucial sector for our development, it's mining. Then, why it's important that Canada reaches an agreement with the Pacific Alliance, even when it already has free trade agreements with each one of its members. The bloc is a market of 225 million people, and it represents 55% of Latin America's foreign trade and 44% of the region's foreign direct investment. If the alliance were a single country, it would be the 8th largest economy in the world, with a combined GDP of over $2 trillion. These figures help to illustrate the size of the Pacific Alliance as trade market and potential partner. The alliance brings together, as you can see, Chile, Mexico, Peru, and Colombia, all political and economically stable countries within our region, and has been implemented in an agile and pragmatic fashion, building around common themes. This approach has allowed the alliance to grow beyond trade only, and it now has technical groups working on education, tourism, people mobility, gender, environment, and labor, to name a few, seeking to coordinate this effort and taking advantage of existing synergies in these areas. From the trade standpoint, we believe that the strategic perspective of an agreement are advantageous. The 4 members of the Pacific Alliance and Canada can accumulate origin, a procedure that will facilitate the entrepreneur of our countries to exchange product with tariff advantages, thus encouraging our insertion in the regional value chain. In addition, the trade negotiation process between the Alliance and Canada presents a great opportunity to advance in a certain homogenization of norms and move forward jointly on the agenda trade issues that go beyond the tariff aspects. Nevertheless, there's another very important aspect. Today, we're facing a complex moment at the international level, and both Chile and the Pacific Alliance are determined to demonstrate their commitment to economic trade opening and regional integration. In the Pacific Alliance, we want to turn current challenges into opportunities, to build an international trading system based on clear rules and aimed at building resilient and sustainable societies. Chile believes that moving forward in creating legal frameworks through these regional agreements constitutes a higher and more strategic stage, since it creates a broader reference point to continue fostering greater integration and synergy among countries with common development visions. For our countries, it is difficult to demonstrate the benefit of this agreement only through economic figures, since the result will not be seen in absolute terms, because they are not only the tariff reduction, but the sum of several factors that the creation of an expanding space of integration brings, like the one we're building through this process. Furthermore, reaching an agreement with Canada and also with Australia, New Zealand, and Singapore, as they're at the same time on the table of negotiation, will take the bloc a step further in fulfilling one of its fundamental objectives, to become an area of trade integration and projection to the Asia-Pacific. And we have to remind that just recently, South Korea has expressed interest, formal interest, in start a dialogue with a view to associate state status. The Pacific Alliance indicated in March 2017 its willingness to start trade negotiations with countries or blocs of the Asia-Pacific region, as long as they are translated into quality agreements with high standard of trade disciplines and that they conclude in the short time. To date, we have had 2 negotiation rounds with Canada, and Chile is prepared to host the 3rd round from the 3rd to 9th of March. And Chile aspired to an alliance that is not only a framework for Latin America integration, but also opens the door to new agreements, new strategies to link us with other countries beyond our borders. These times requires it, and we are convinced that together we're stronger and we will be more prosperous. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. We'll move over to the Embassy of Colombia, and we've got Mr. Vargas, the Minister Counselor. Go ahead, sir, you got the floor.
Good morning, Mr. Chair. Honorable members of the committee, thank you for inviting the Embassy of Colombia to share our government's view on the potential agreement between Canada and the Pacific Alliance. As most of you know, the Pacific Alliance, after receiving statements of interest for deepening trade ties from Canada, New Zealand, Australia, and Singapore, is currently in the midst of negotiations that should lead to agreeing a series of FTAs that the Pacific Alliance will eventually have with each potential associate member. Indeed, the Pacific Alliance is a market of more than 220 million consumers and the world's 7th largest economy bloc. It accounts for 34% of the GDP of Latin America and the Caribbean and concentrates 41% of the FDI in the region. The figures corresponding to Colombia speak for themselves. In 2017, bilateral trade amounted to $1.1 billion, and Canadian investment in Colombia in 2016 was the largest by a foreign investor that year. In fact, Colombia's foreign investment in 2017 continued to increase for the 7th straight year. It is important to note that the objective of negotiations is the association of the candidates to the Pacific Alliance, and that the Pacific Alliance mandate is not to divert from the framework of its integration mechanism and the existing trade protocols. Having said that, I would like to briefly touch on how the Pacific Alliance, by expanding trade opportunities and promoting deep integration, brings benefits very much aligned with Canadian views and priorities. Let's start with gender. Since its creation in 2012, the Pacific Alliance has been committed to include gender as a cross-cutting element, establishing a working group that incorporates gender in all the programs of the mechanism. For instance, under the trade promotion component, the Alliance has a very successful Business Women Forum, as well as a community platform for female entrepreneurship. From the Colombian perspective, a benefit to be gained, for example, is the effective integration in global value chains. We consider the accumulation of origins in sectors like textile and apparel will not only increase trade, but will also provide more opportunities for women in targeted regions highly affected by the conflict in Colombia. With respect to environment, Canada and the Pacific Alliance members have advanced in domestic ratifications of the Paris Agreement. Canada is well known for its global leadership at home and abroad to fight climate change, which means that we all share the same concerns. This represents an opportunity to create a space for dialogue and debate on specific actions and strategies for regional economic integration in a sustainable way. Cooperation and lessons learned from Canada to embrace climate change will be beneficial for the region. And there are other benefits for Canada. The Pacific Alliance has accomplished a very ambitious agenda in a very short time. In addition to tariff elimination, the Alliance is moving towards financial integration, pension mobility, and fiscal transparency among the 4 countries. The creation of the Pacific Alliance Venture Capital Fund facilitates financing for SMEs. In this context, existing Canadian cooperation is focused on strengthening the export capacity of SMEs, especially in the agriculture sector. From the Colombian point of view, Canada is already deeply involved in several initiatives that aim at helping market-driven cooperative development among farmer organizations. These initiatives promote governance, better opportunities, and higher income for small farmers, especially in communities and in areas greatly affected by the conflict. Mr. Chair and honorable members of the committee, to conclude, I would like to refer to a recurrent topic in discussions about Colombia. After more than 4 years of negotiation of a peace agreement, the Colombian government is putting an end to a 50-year conflict that caused 220,000 deaths, of which more than 80% were civilians. During the past 50 years, more than 6 million people were displaced, 25,000 were kidnapped, and 27,000 went missing. Although sometimes the news might not be encouraging, the final agreement signed with the FARC strengthens and improves the legislation and institutional efforts undertaken by the state to ensure the protection of human rights through public policy, reparation of victims, protection measures, and fight against impunity. In fact, Colombia's homicide rate is at 40-year low. Thanks again for the opportunity to share this information with you.
Thank you, sir. We're going to move over to the Embassy of Peru, and we have Minister Molinari. Welcome, sir. You have the floor.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and members of this committee. Thank you for your kind invitation. It is a pleasure to be here to talk about a very important topic, the study of a potential agreement between Canada and Pacific Alliance. Peru considers that the Pacific Alliance has to frame its efforts with complying with the 2030 Sustainable Development Goals in order to allow its members to efficiently immerse themselves in the globalized world. In this sense, this regional integration mechanism's vision is to promote initiatives that combat poverty through strategies that favor economic growth and target various social needs like education, health, employment, climate change, and the protection of the environment, along with strengthening its international projection. The Pacific Alliance should unfold efforts to consolidate itself as a mechanism of integration that promotes commercial openness, growth, competitiveness, as well as protection of fundamental liberties. In this sense, Peru considers that the 2030 vision should have in mind 4 components. 1. Building an area of deep integration. The 4 liberties that seek this mechanism, goods, services, capital, and persons, should help position the Pacific Alliance as an active participant and as a solid partner in the region, consolidating itself as an investment and commercial hub, and as a mechanism integrated in the global economy. The Pacific Alliance exhibits distinctive characteristics, especially linked with the observance of rules and of international institutions, as well as the compliance of the rule of law, democracy, the respect of human rights, and, as stated in Article 2 of the Framework Agreement, the separation of powers. The Pacific Alliance should advance generating confidence and international reputation through the construction of strategic alliances with countries and regions that lead economic and social development in the world. 2. Bridge to the Asia-Pacific, taking advantage of the participation of its members in various integration schemes and their diverse geographical localization. The Pacific Alliance aspires to become an important bridge, economic and commercial, cultural and political, between Latin America and the Asia-Pacific region through mechanisms of cooperation between regions. 3. International projection. The Pacific Alliance will promote tangible results in accordance with the Sustainable Development Goals. It is expected that it will provide pragmatic answers and solutions to world problems. In this sense, it will work in the design of mutual beneficial actions with new associate members and other global actors such as ASEAN, EU, APEC, as well as with regional mechanisms that could help to attain the alliance's objectives. 4. A tool for better well-being. The Pacific Alliance is focused on coordinating efforts that have a direct effect on civil society, attaining better welfare and overcoming economic inequality. The Canadian economy, based on its ample and diverse natural resources, has a structure similar to that of Peru, in which the mining, energy, and forestry industries stand out. Canada has been successful in transferring the developments in these industries to others, such as communications, energy, transport infrastructure, and financial services. Moreover, Canada is now positioned as one of Peru's major mining investors, distinguishing itself by the active participation of private companies in projects with a social development component that have a positive impact in our rural communities. In this context, the Pacific Alliance and Peru in particular can profit from Canada's experience as to how to use natural resources as a stimulating agent of the economy. Canada is an active observer state that has a privileged relation with the Pacific Alliance, backed by the Joint Declaration of Association signed in 2016 that established a specific agenda on cooperation. In that framework, a series of cooperation projects are being implemented, accounting for more than $18 million in areas like education and skills within extractive industries, small and medium enterprises, and the environment. The next step identified by the Alliance to deepen its relations with this important partner has been the negotiation of a high standard agreement that deepens commercial and economic relations between Canada and the Pacific Alliance members. Such agreement will allow Canada to become an associated state in the Pacific Alliance. Peru is a long-time partner of Canada, having a free trade agreement that entered in force in August 2009, among other important international conventions. Both countries are also part of those that have concluded the negotiations on TPP 11. These two agreements are a milestone in the integration process that the Pacific Alliance countries want to establish with Canada and with the rest of candidate countries that are interested in becoming associated states. In that sense, it was natural for the Pacific Alliance to reinforce areas where there is already cooperation with Canada and to search for new commercial opportunities and diversified markets. This is the added value that our countries wish to attain in the negotiations that are being held with Australia, Canada, New Zealand, and Singapore. 2 rounds of negotiations have already been held in Cali, Colombia, and Gold Coast, Australia, while the third is expected to be carried out in Santiago de Chile, and the fourth round in Ottawa. In these negotiations, Peru and its Pacific Alliance partners wish to build on the commercial agreements signed in order to reap tangible benefits for society as a whole. Apart from the commercial impact and the consolidation and projection of the Pacific Alliance and as one of the most dynamic regions in the Asia-Pacific, the relationship with its associate members will allow us to connect to 4 of world's top 10 most innovative ecosystems in terms of science, technology, and innovation. In this process, communications with the private sector and civil society will be of great importance for the advancement of the negotiations between the Pacific Alliance and its associated states. Each free trade agreement constitutes an opportunity to improve, even for a country as Peru that, as has been said, links its foreign policy with the compliance of the 2030 Sustainable Development Goals. In that sense, the negotiations with the candidate states are a tool that should contribute to fight poverty and benefit the most vulnerable sectors among them, like small and medium enterprises, indigenous people, equal opportunities for women and men, among others. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. And we're going to move over now to the Embassy of Mexico, and we have His Excellency Ambassador Pere Yocom Persignon. Welcome, sir. Our Canada and Mexico are in a very challenging, exciting times right now dealing with trade, you're well aware of. And I'd just like to say before you start, we had a very good meeting in Washington with your chief negotiator for NAFTA, Kenneth Smith Ramos. He had a very good presentation with us, and we were on the same page, I say the least. Indeed. So yeah, like I said, our committee just finished up a study on NAFTA. But we're here about the Pacific Alliance, and we welcome you very much in your busy schedule to be here with your staff today. So, sir, you got the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Good morning to all the distinguished members of this committee. On behalf of the Government of Mexico, I would like to begin by thanking the committee for the invitation to participate in today's hearing. Alongside my colleagues, I am delighted to be here with you in this honorable House to share Mexico's vision regarding the Pacific Alliance and the potential trade agreement between Canada and the bloc. Canada and Mexico are allies and close partners in many fronts. Our relationship continues to strengthen and enrich itself after year, not only through dialogue at the highest level, but in the day-to-day operations in which interactions between entrepreneurs, investors, tourists, students, retirees, scientists, and temporary workers have grown exponentially. In terms of trade, Mexico is Canada's third largest partner, and we work closely with our Canadian friends in other fora, such as, indeed, the North American Free Trade Agreement or the Comprehensive and Progressive Trans-Pacific Partnership. Since 2012, Canada has been actively working with the Pacific Alliance, first as an observer country with significant investments in the sectors such as mining and energy, and now as one of the first nations to seek the status of associate state of this regional and strategic platform. In this regard, Mexico welcomes the negotiations between Canada and the Pacific Alliance, which without doubt deepen our relationship and reaffirm our common interests and the potential for an even greater economic complementarity and integration of our productive chains, further strengthening the international and regional regulatory frameworks in which we conduct businesses every day. Since its establishment, the Pacific Alliance has allowed for a successful regional integration of its member countries. The pragmatic spirit that guides the Pacific Alliance is one of the principles that has made possible to achieve the objectives set, always by consensus and with greater development and growth for the member countries. This mechanism has progressively allowed us to consolidate a higher economic integration through 4 pillars. First, free movement of goods and services, which has translated into the elimination of 92% of our customs tariffs and the establishment of provisions on financial, cross-border, and air services. Second, free movement of capital, through which we strengthen the largest stock market in Latin America, known as MILA. Third, free movement of people, eliminating visa requirements for tourists and business people while promoting a mobility platform for students and academia. And fourth, a pillar on cooperation. As such, the Pacific Alliance seeks integration beyond trade and investment. We collaborate in key common interest areas through technical groups on issues such as the environment and climate change, social development, and science, technology, and innovation, or small and medium-sized enterprises, aspects that would certainly be enriched with a deeper involvement of Canada. The success of Pacific Alliance is shown by the interest of international community, with over 50 observer countries across the world. For Mexico, it is a priority to promote stronger ties with observer countries and other international organizations due to the potential they offer in the development of mutually beneficial cooperation projects. Chile, Colombia, Mexico, and Peru share democratic principles and values. We have a dynamic and globalized markets, which provide favorable conditions for businesses and investments to flourish. According to the World Bank's Doing Business indicators, in 2016, the Pacific Alliance member countries ranked the highest in the ease of doing business among other Latin American and Caribbean nations. The countries of the Pacific Alliance represent a market of over 200 million consumers with a combined GDP of approximately 39% of Latin America, which would represent the 8th largest economy, the 7th export power worldwide, accounting for about half of total Latin American exports. In this context, the negotiations currently taking place with Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and Singapore prove that the Pacific Alliance seeks to become a more diverse economic and trade integration platform, with special attention to one of the most dynamic regions in the world, Asia-Pacific. The potential treaty between Canada and the Pacific Alliance would provide a more robust and updated framework for trade and investment and trade disciplines between our countries, as well as further diversification of Canada's economic relations. Furthermore, it offers unique opportunities for Canadian companies to connect to larger supply chains in other regions of the world. During early February, the second round of negotiations in Australia allowed our teams to move forward regarding market access for goods, services, and investment, public procurement, and temporary entry of business people, among other topics, including the willingness of all parties to work in regulatory cooperation to facilitate trade across different sectors. The Mexican government looks forward to continue the productive meetings during the upcoming third round of negotiations in Santiago de Chile and in Ottawa during May. It is our hope that sufficient progress will be achieved during these negotiations before this year's Pacific Alliance Leaders Summit, which will take place in Mexico towards the end of July, and to reach a successful agreement by the end of the year. Let me conclude by saying that it has been through its vast network of trade agreements that Mexico has reaffirmed its commitment towards free trade, productive integration, and the mobility of capital and people. Since Mexico's incorporation to the GATT in 1986 and subsequent trade agreements, we have experienced a very productive transformation of the economy, which has convinced us that free trade is a great catalyst for growth. In our view, the advancement and growth of the Pacific Alliance is an important step in this direction. In this regard, we welcome Canada's decision to transit from a very active observer country to a candidate to become an associate state of the Pacific Alliance. Mesdames et Messieurs, je vous remercie.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, sir. And Canadians are not only familiar with your Mexican goods, we're very familiar with your beaches and hospitality. So that's another big factor we have going with each other. So without further ado, we're going to have dialogue with the MPs. I'm not going to be too strict with the time if an ambassador has to finish up their thoughts, so I'm going to let it go. But just keep in mind, we try to get as many people to get their questions in. I'd like to wrap up probably in about 40 minutes. So that being said, we're going to get going at it. And Mr. Allison, you got the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, to our ambassadors and counselors and diplomats at the head of the table. I just, I think as MPs, we are afforded rare opportunities because of our jobs and our positions to see different things. And one of the most memorable events for me was sitting on this trade committee back in 2008, 2009, when we headed to Colombia. And our trade committee had a chance to meet with President Uribe at the time. And we remember you guys were trying to get a free trade deal, and people are saying, well, you got human rights issues, and should we do it or shouldn't we do it? And I remember sitting around a table with President Urube and his ministers saying, do you see these people here? There's not one in my cabinet that hasn't been affected by violence and FARC. And it's so important that we get a free trade deal. And we need Canada to move forward because they're trying to get a deal with the U.S. and the U.S. is kind of not moving forward. And I remember at the same time there were troops showing up in Venezuela at the border at Colombia, and the U.S. is saying, listen, what can we get you? Can we get you military and arms? And President Uribe said, no, get us a free trade deal. It's so important for us. And these moments kind of sort of burned into your head. And, you know, being there last year or a year and a half ago on Foreign Affairs, as you guys went through the peace process, talk to us about how that process is going, how important trade is, and why it's important for us to continue to engage. I mean, it's great that, you know, 8 or 9 years later, we're actually talking about how we can strengthen trade, not whether a country should be allowed into a deal because of what's going on, and how important that's been to your country in terms of trying to diversify from the challenges that you guys have had, and how that relates to the peace process going forward.
Muchas gracias por la pregunta.
Thank you very much for the question. I'd like to begin by saying that perhaps the most important thing that this government has done in the area of human rights is the peace process with the FARC that began 4 years ago. President Santos, from the beginning of dialogue, put the victims at the heart of negotiations. That meant that it was focusing on human rights and on individuals. For Colombia, the peace process was the first process in the world that began with looking at the victims and a commission on truth. It lasted over 50 years, and there were 8 million victims, rather. Sadly, we have the highest rates of landmines as well. People who have disappeared, over 60,000 people have disappeared. Many statistics that have put Colombia in a bad position on the international stage in the area of human rights. But what's important to note is that Colombia's efforts in the area of human rights has focused on 4 aspects. The first is public policy. Colombia has a human rights policy since 2014. It's for the period of 2014 to 2034, the post-conflict period, where we'll be focusing on human rights. Human rights are included in the National Development Plan. The 32 ministries of Colombia have included human rights in their development planning, which means that efforts will be from the national to the municipal level. We've provided reparations to over 600,000 victims since 2013. And Colombia has made impressive efforts in the area of protection. It's increased the budget for protection for victims. And finally, there's the fight against impunity. Colombia is attempting to look at impunity for those who have violated human rights. 2016 to 2017, 50% of cases have gone through the Justice Ministry and the UN to improve investigation protocols. Of course, there's another 50% to clear up. But I think the conditions are there in Colombia after 50 years of conflict with deep social and economic wounds. This is an important advancement. And I'd like to conclude by saying one more thing. Colombia, as you know, like Canada, joined the human rights process of the UN. Last year, Colombia was the first non-European country of the 14 that have presented an action plan in the area of human rights. So just to mention an aspect that Colombia has looked at in this area. We've demonstrated to the international community that Colombia is doing things well, that it has the support of the UN for the ratification of the peace process, that it has the support of the international community. As Dean Allison has said, today, 8 years later, you want to explore the possibility of increasing trade between our two countries. So I think that's a good signal. Thank you.
Liberals now, Mr. Fonseca, you got the floor.
To the excellencies and the representatives from the various Pacific Alliance countries that are here to speak to us today. Thank you very much. You know, there's a lot of skepticism today around trade agreements, be it here in Canada or around the world, especially from the public. And we've made a concerted effort in Canada to consult in a wide and deep way with the public, with stakeholders, et cetera, to be able to find what is the best path forward. And this is open to any of the presenters. Can you tell me what you have done in your countries to be able to inform your public, your stakeholders, the government, to in regards to a trade agreement like the Pacific Alliance?
Muchas gracias por
Thank you very much for the question. I'd like to talk about what Chile has done in the area of discussing this and putting it forward for the consideration of the business sector, civil society, and all stakeholders who have something to say in the area of the agreements that Chile takes part in. Chile has 24 free trade agreements. That's over 60 economies with which Chile has open trade without tariffs. With nearly total liberalization. To reach this point, we've had to hold talks, we've had to listen, and it's something that's done regularly. It's not just the executive, the government, that does this. As with this committee, in Chile, there are bodies within Parliament that need to provide their approval to agreements. There are hearings that are held, as is done here. But at the negotiating table, when Chile participates, we talk about all of the sectors that would be participating. Civil society, the business sector, and the government entities as well. In the negotiating process, they provide their opinion throughout the whole process. With free trade agreements, in some areas, there are more benefits than in others. And of course, that's where we need to look at how we can protect the industries or help the industries when it's necessary to redirect their capacities and their efforts. Regarding the Pacific Alliance, as my colleague mentioned, the ambassador from Mexico, it's an extraordinary tool. It's been very successful, not only because I'm speaking as the ambassador for Chile, but because it's clear that the free trade agreement with the existing market of the 4 countries of the Pacific Alliance is very beneficial. And now, no one is opposed to it. The same thing happened with the TPP, which was called into question at the beginning. But through these systems that I've described to you, Chile has gone forward with these agreements without any major opposition. And we try to correct those cases where people could be more negatively affected in one area of the economy.
Gracias.
Thank you.
Gracias.
Thank you. I will answer in Spanish as well, if I may. I don't want to repeat what my colleague has said, the ambassador for Chile. I would just say that in the case of Mexico, with the Pacific Alliance, as with any other international trade agreement in which Mexico participates, there are consultations that are led to hear points of view, opinions, areas of opportunity, challenges at the government level and at the legislative level through specialized committees of the Senate and the House of Commons. There are forums as well with specialists, so we can study these areas and have ongoing participation and communication with different stakeholders, including the private sector. They interact with the government, with negotiators, to be informed of advancements and challenges, and to have the available information to have the best opportunities to present the best options. Thank you.
Move over to the NDP now, and Ms. Ramsey, you've got the floor.
Thank you, Your Excellencies, ministers, and diplomats for being here today for this important conversation. I think a really critical piece to our study that we're doing on the Pacific Alliance are what you're bringing forward today. Something that was mentioned is labor, and certainly working people have been discussed in previous witnesses coming before this committee. The Canadian Labour Congress has been before this committee, and they've presented to us that no positive labor changes have been implemented or affected thus far by free trade agreements. I know that labor is top of mind in the NAFTA negotiations right now, and certainly I've heard several of you mention it in your presentations today. To Canadians and our labor community, it's really about seeking a level playing field for working people. And I wonder if you can speak to what you see in the Pacific Alliance agreement that would address this important issue for working people, and any advancements that you've seen or that could be possible in this partnership for labor. I'll open it to, if you'd all like to respond, I'd like to hear from everyone.
Gracias.
Thank you. I'd like to highlight that we're talking about trade negotiations between the Pacific Alliance and Canada. The focus is on trade, but that doesn't mean labor is not part of it. So there are mechanisms like working groups. There's a working group within the Pacific Alliance on labor issues, everything that has to do with improving labor standards for workers. In addition, Colombia and Canada have a bilateral dialogue, a complementary FTA that seeks to increase communication to see how we can improve labor standards in the area of trade. I can't speak too much to this because currently there are negotiations underway between Canada and Colombia for an action plan. But I can say that cooperation with Canada and Colombia in the area of labor has been significant. Colombia has moved forward tremendously over the past 4 years. It's increased its budgets for inspections. It's much more efficient in imposing fines against companies that are not conducting proper hiring processes, and it's much better at recovering those fines. And the Justice Department has set up a special working group, a task force, with protocols from in order to fight against union violence in Colombia. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I'd like to add a comment. I'd like to highlight what Colombia has said. Peru has a labor cooperation agreement that it signed on to in 2009 as a complement to the free trade agreement between Peru and Canada. The goal of that agreement on labor was to increase the economic opportunities of the FTA through developing human resources, protecting the human rights of workers, the cooperation between workers, and increasing skills on an ongoing basis. The goal is also to ensure the basic rights of workers and to strengthen cooperation in the area of labor and to move forward on international commitments on Peru and Canada's part. This agreement sets out periodic meetings of a council to discuss areas of common interest in the area of labor. Thank you.
Quickly, I don't want to be repetitive with what my colleagues have mentioned. I will not refer to what Mexico has done since that was not the direct question, but I would say that in terms of the Pacific Alliance, the work has begun. There's a group on labor. We have a reference, for example, in TPP, which is an interesting reference that I'm sure will allow us to get some of the issues in terms of labor rights and protection of rights and the standards. So, and some of the issues that have been mentioned by my colleagues. So we view it very positive, and certainly whatever ends up being agreed on this topic will be beneficial to all the countries.
Over to the Liberals now, Madame Lapointe.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. Excellencies, welcome. I have questions. You just said that you have looked at the TPP and the rights of workers. Are there agreements that you have inspired you in your negotiations with the Pacific Alliance and with Canada?
In the case of Mexico, I think we have a clear conviction. Let me change perhaps to Spanish so that I can be more fluent. En el caso de México,
In the case of Mexico, we're convinced of the advantages of free trade. As I said in my presentation, since '86, we've been part of GATT. And we've been building capacity and finding out more about free trade. In this round of negotiations, in terms of the modernization that we're seeing, that we're going through with the CPTPP and all of the experience of our negotiators in the area of free trade, we're able to update our knowledge in different areas. We're looking at the different aspects that are necessary to negotiate in all areas. So I wouldn't summarize this in just one or two agreements, but it's our general expertise and our knowledge of free trade, our confidence in it. We've been putting it forward in different negotiations. We have these two, the Pacific Alliance and the CPTPP, but we're also negotiating with Europe to modernize our agreement. We're deepening our trade relations with countries like Brazil and Argentina. We have a full agenda in the area of trade diversification, and our negotiators are strengthening our capacity.
No one has mentioned e-trade, e-commerce. I know we talk about it in the various agreements, but no one has mentioned it today. I'd like to hear what you have to say about that. Chile or Peru, Colombia?
Sorry for that.
De hecho, comercio electrónico estaba en mi speech.
E-trade, digital trade was in my speech, but we took it out. Digital trade, there isn't a committee on it as such, but there is a committee that has a digital agenda. So if the advancements of the working group, we're not aware of them yet, but if it's a concern, we recognize, of course, that Colombia has worked with Canada to develop more tools so we can develop this type of trade, which has much less effect on the environment, it's less costly. So through cooperation with groups in Ottawa, we've been able to develop trade. We could share details on this committee. I don't have them with me, but it is something that's being considered in the negotiations.
Merci.
Thank you very much.
Para añadir que en el seno de la
I would add that within the alliance, there's the one ticket window for trade, and we're looking at how to make things digital, how to make transactions digital, and I think that's something that's worth noting.
J'aurais une autre question.
I have another question. We've talked about labor mobility, but there are two aspects. I know many temporary workers come from countries of the Pacific Alliance, and some of them come to work here in Canada during the summer. This is highly qualified workforce that go back to their countries afterward. What could we do for this is a good agreement for us and for you?
Well, okay.
I can share with you the experience we have in Mexico, which is we have a seasonal agricultural workers program that works very well. I think it complements the needs of both countries. Has been working for over 40 years, and we have now over 25,000 workers that come every year to Canada and return to Mexico every year. And besides that, we have going to the Pacific Alliance. What we are trying to do as a group is to allow for the mobility, again, to facilitate the mobility of people, which has proven in the case of Mexico also beneficial, something important. If you look at statistics on the movement in the last 3 or 4 years from people from Peru, Colombia, and Chile into Mexico and vice versa has increased in a very important manner, which has opened more opportunities to all of us.
Okay.
Sí,
We're going to go into the second round. I think. Oh, sorry.
Just
Go
quick
ahead, sir.
answer.
Sorry.
En cuanto a movilidad, efectivamente, como dice el embajador,
With regard to labor mobility, as the Mexican ambassador said, Chile, with countries in the alliance and other neighboring countries, has mechanisms that allow for the flow of temporary workers. And this is something that interests us greatly in the Pacific Alliance and specifically for Chile. To have, for example, expert Canadian workers who can help us to build and design all sorts of solar energy or wind projects where we're working with other parts of the world. We think that including Canada in those projects would be entirely positive, and that does need to be on the table.
And that ends our first round. We're going to go in the second round. I'm going to try to keep it 3 minutes. Just if you can just ask a question, and then that way we probably can get all MPs to end out having a question with this round. So we can start off 3 minutes, or if the member of Parliament can say a few things in a question, and we can move on to the next. So we're going to start off with Mr. Peterson. You got the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, honorable guests, for being with us today. Very much appreciated. I do have a couple of questions, but I think I might only have time for one, and it's going to center around foreign direct investment. I think Canadians, it's almost around $50 billion into Pacific Alliance nations. Do you, A, see us becoming a part of the bloc, a way of increasing that direct investment, and B, flowing it in both directions, as opposed to, it seems to be there's more Canadian money flowing into your countries than vice versa? And I guess sort of consequential of that, is there a need for some sort of investor-state dispute mechanism in any agreement if there's a sophistication in the foreign direct investment that's flowing? So that's one question, very big question, but I'd like to hear everyone's comments on that, if possible. Thank you.
Quisiera contestar la primera parte del...
I'd like to answer the first part, and then I'd like to ask my colleague to respond to the second part. With regard to foreign direct investment, we see the potential for that to increase in both directions. In the sectors we've discussed, such as natural resources, there are also opportunities in the areas of technology and so on. That has already happened with many countries that we have agreements with, and so we see no reason that it could not occur with the 4 countries that could associate with us here. Now, with regard to ISDS, which is a bit more technical, I'd like to ask my colleague who represents our economics branch.
Okay. La primera parte yo quisiera...
The first thing I'd like to say is that FTAs exist specifically to set rules so that investors can feel more secure in sending their capital to other countries. So with better regulation, there can be more investment on both sides. Secondly, in the case of the Pacific Alliance, it's a living mechanism because we're accustomed to seeing these mechanisms in TPP or NAFTA or CETA. There are methods that are going to be developed in the Pacific Alliance, including the parts that are about labor and investment protections. There isn't a mechanism such as ISDS, which you mentioned, but we do think that in a future version of the Pacific Alliance, we could move towards the measures that are typical in FTAs, because the Pacific Alliance is a mixture between the aspects that we consider crucial to FTAs, such as tariffs, which in any case have already been lowered to almost non-existence, and then other areas which we have moved forward a great deal in models such as CETA and the TPP.
Si me permite, señor presidente, yo quisiera agregar...
Mr. Chair, I'd like to add that when it comes to Chile, Canada has $20 billion in direct investment. It's the 3rd biggest investor in Chile, and the biggest one in the mining sector, as I mentioned. However, there are also significant amounts in other sectors such as electricity, water, the chemical industry, transportation, warehousing, and the finance sector. Recently, Scotiabank acquired a Spanish bank by investing $2.2 billion, which makes up 14% of the market share. So now, Scotiabank will become the 3rd biggest private bank in Chile. Chile also invests in Canada, with about $2 billion invested in Canada, specifically or greatly in the service sector. We hope that an agreement between the Pacific Alliance and Canada will increase the amounts invested in both directions. And as my colleague mentioned, we hope that the mechanisms will come to be, although that already exists in our bilateral agreement, but we hope to be able to coordinate things so that the Alliance and Canada can have their mechanism to protect investments.
Short one, and then we're going to
Gra-
move over to Mr. Holt.
Gracias. Por el lado de Colombia.
Now, as for Colombia, we do have in our bilateral agreement, we have an investment chapter. But I'd also like to clarify one thing. With regard to Canada, in 2016, Canada was the biggest investor in Colombia for the first time in history. It invested over $2 billion in a major company through a fund. CPTQ has also invested in infrastructure. The Energy Management Corporation has also done so. Many provincial funds of almost all the provinces of Canada have invested in Colombia, which means that the business climate is good. And all of the due diligence carried out by these various provincial funds has given excellent results. And this shows that the business climate is currently very favorable with regard to what you mentioned about the investment disputes. Now, for Peru, I'd like to highlight the importance of Canadian investment in mining and the very great importance of corporate social responsibility. Now, mining is a very important sector for both of our countries and constitutes a pillar of our trade relationships. And we would like to increase our cooperation in these areas through the Pacific Alliance. We want to broaden these relationships. Investment in mining in Peru is very significant, and the presence of Scotiabank, once again, is very important.
Thank you very much. And we're going now to our special MP, Mr. Holbach, who is he's learning Spanish, so we commend him for that, learning Spanish and speaking it in Saskatchewan. So, Mr. Holbach, no pressure, but
thanks for that, eh?
You got the floor, sir.
Buenos dias, bienvenido. And I'm going to switch to English. You know, I was with Prime Minister Harper and Minister Fast in Calais when the negotiations were ongoing there. And I remember us talking afterwards, just being so impressed about how the leaders were driving the agenda and how they were setting the stage to make this happen. It wasn't the bureaucrats, it was actually the leaders sitting around the table saying we need to do this for our people. The other thing that impressed me compared to what we're seeing in NAFTA today is you didn't look at it as what can I get out of the agreement, it's what can we do together to make our region, our bloc stronger. And I think that's such an impressive goal because it'll help your people in each of your countries and it'll take your strengths and magnify them by 4. And I know I wished at the time we could have joined on and been the 5th player, but there were some other issues there. But I really look forward to us actually getting closer now as we move forward. The other thing I always say is a trade agreement should always be fluid. It should always be progressing and moving forward. And, you know, this definitely will do that here for Canada and for the Pacific Alliance countries. Now, the question I have is with MILA and the TSX. How do you see those two functions working together? I know you've brought your exchanges together in the Pacific Alliance countries, and I'm kind of curious how that's going. But I'd also like to know, like, the TSX is the mining venture. Like, all the mining capital is raised in the TSX, and it's distributed around the world, and a lot of it comes into your country. So how do you see that coming together and being stronger and working for the region if we move forward?
Okay, let me go first. In the case of Mexico, the way we are working in MILA is obviously each exchange, cada bolsa de...
Each stock exchange continues to be independent and working in its own country, but they have decided to operate jointly. So they did not fuse into a single entity, but they do operate jointly. And the benefit is that businesses can benefit from all of the projects in the region. What I mean by that is that there are more possibilities for capital funding for projects in the region. Now, with the TSX, that's a very promising opportunity to further broaden the market, the capital market in the region, which would increase competitiveness and the terms for our various businesses. I believe it would be a very promising opportunity which will enable us to allow the businesses in the region to expand.
If you list on an exchange in Mexico, do you automatically get listed on the other exchanges?
¿Quieres contestar? Sí entiendo que sí operarían.
If I understand correctly, the businesses that are listed would appear on the entire market. The technical details, I would want to consult financial experts so that I don't give you an incomplete answer.
To share with you, you may recall that when NAFTA won, when the 3 countries were together negotiating, we have the same philosophy.
Exactly.
We were free traders, and we have to fight for our own constituencies as a government. But this time, we have our mutual friend in between, has a different philosophy. And then we have to face that fact of life, that it's difficult to know what they have in mind or what is the final goal. But what we know is that they are very concerned about deficits. And we, as a Canada and Mexico, we have to face that and be able to come out with a very creative solutions in that area. I just wanted to share that with you because when you start, talking about how things have changed in the arena, internationally, and U.S. not just with NAFTA has changed the philosophy, but with WTO, we don't know what is going to happen in the future, and I think it's very important to have a different approach this time.
Good questions, and we're going to move over to Liberals now. Madam Ludwig, you got the floor.
Buenos dias. My question is actually for all of you, Your Excellencies and Ministers. My question is regarding our progressive trade agenda that we have in Canada, and I believe that it's mutually supported amongst the member countries here. If you could explain to our committee how you reach out to women in your countries to benefit from international trade within the Pacific Alliance and others, and maybe it's microcredit or some examples like that. Thank you.
Okay, parto yo. Muchas gracias. En el caso.
Thank you. For Chile, gender is at the very top of our agenda, and that is something we're addressing. And in fact, we have also included it when it comes to writing trade agreements. We should recall that when President Bachelet visited Canada during the negotiations for the Chile-Canada Free Trade Agreement, there was a gender chapter that was included to ensure that women would be able to benefit from international trade and to also ensure their rights and empowerment. After all, in Chile, women's empowerment is an important issue. We have, for example, quotas for female candidates for political parties, and we have all sorts of other protections for women. And we are working closely with Canada's Status of Women Department to exchange best practices and our experiences. And in the Pacific Alliance, Canada's progressive agenda is very familiar to us, is one that we wish to adopt as well. We've had many discussions about that. And we're going to continue following up on that. But this is not an issue that is unfamiliar to us. On the contrary, we want to promote gender equality. And not only to help women, but also there are other aspects of that progressive agenda that we consider very important.
México y Canadá comparten.
Mexico and Canada share a vision on many of those issues, a common vision. when it comes to gender, environment, and labor issues. For example, we are looking for new chapters in the Pacific Alliance with regard to these issues. I would say that a good indicator of what is happening in NAFTA. We want to add provisions about this to the body of the agreement, where we would include these environmental and labor provisions. This shows that Mexico wishes to continue promoting the development of these important issues. And these are areas where we share a common vision with the Canadian agenda. For Peru, we are working to create policies to promote the objectives of the 2030 objectives, including the fifth one, which is to promote gender equality and to encourage women's and girls' empowerment. Peru recognizes that gender equality is not only a fundamental human right, but also will constitute the foundations for a prosperous and sustainable world. The more women can have access to education, jobs, and medical attention, the more our economies will flourish. That is why Peru has created the Women's and Vulnerable Populations Department. And within the Pacific Alliance, there is a technical working group on gender. Thank you. Now, to speak on behalf of Colombia, there are three things I'd like to say. Firstly, institutionality. We have a Secretariat for Women's Issues, and that's where we discuss all issues that have to do with gender equality. Secondly, as mentioned in the peace accord, we focus greatly on the victims, especially female victims of the conflict, and we incorporated multiple activities or methods to help them return to society, just to launch businesses, to encourage entrepreneurship. And Canada has helped us greatly in these areas, and we've done a lot to forward that. And finally, there's an initiative with our Labor Department and the United Nations for a project called Equipares. It's our first initiative in Colombia in public policy to ensure that when it comes to entrepreneurship, there is greater equality between men and women. So it has to do with hiring, development, salary and pay, and inclusive language. Thank you.
We got time enough if everybody asks a short question here. I think we're going to go, Mr. Kerry, you got the floor.
Very much, Mr. Chair, and want to thank the witnesses for being here. So I'm going to get right to it because I only have 3 minutes, is it? All right.
Question for all panelists and varies from 5 to 8. So
all right.
You got the floor anyway.
All right. I wanted to talk a little bit about regulatory coordination and coherence. Whenever you have trade agreements, it's so important, I think, that you look at regulations, because sometimes if you don't get it right, they can become non-tariff barriers. And I was just wondering if you could comment on how important it is when you're looking at regulations, how it affects modernization, standardization, customs procedures, things along those lines, and how important it is to make sure that it's addressed in these trade agreements.
Son temas muy importantes, sin duda.
These are extremely important issues. As I mentioned in my initial remarks, in the Pacific Alliance, the member states have increased the facility of doing business in the region, which shows that we desire to make these procedures more flexible so that businesses can grow. Now, for Mexico, we're seeing that throughout all of our negotiations. It's crucial to ensure that there's compatibility and standardization of regulations. In the Pacific Alliance, I think if Canada joined us, we would have the opportunity to share best practices, which would allow us to go further in that direction. The advantage of these negotiations is that these countries, our countries and Canada, already have FTAs, and so we have already discussed and thought about these issues. For Chile, for the modernization of our FTA, we will include the whole issue of rules of origin. We will perfect our SPS measures. We are going to clarify procurement, include an investment chapter. So we've already done that, in fact, on a bilateral level with Canada. That's already been done to harmonize the issues between all 5 countries. Is just around the corner because we know that will allow us to broaden our markets. I think that my respected colleagues have summed up this issue quite well. I'd just like to mention that in the 20 technical working groups of the Alliance, there is a specific group which discusses regulatory improvements. I would add that our Committee for the Facilitation of Trade is one of our technical groups, and we also have a committee that's working on a one-stop shop system for regulatory issues.
You got a question?
I think that mining, it's no surprise that that's been top of mind and a part of a lot of our conversations here. We know in 2015, 28.7% of all Canadian mining assets abroad were in Pacific Alliance countries. I heard Minister Molinari speak to this earlier, and it's talking about the balance that needs to be achieved in mining with human rights, the environment, and Canadian companies being in all of your countries. So I wonder if you can speak a little bit to the provisions in a Canada-Pacific Alliance that would help develop extractive sectors, but in a manner that could be characterized as socially and environmentally responsible.
Chile or?
Tengo opción?
Yeah, just short answers, please.
I'll go ahead. Okay, very good. That's an excellent question. And naturally, and I'm mainly talking on behalf of Chile, but I think this applies to the other countries in the alliance. But anyway, for us, protecting the environment is critical. And we need to ensure that our institutions work well. We've drawn lessons from the past. All businesses, and not just foreign businesses, also Chilean businesses, need to respect our standards. So that today, no corporation should feel that it's being discriminated against simply because it is foreign. If this system didn't apply equally to all companies, we wouldn't be seeing all the foreign investment that we have in Chile. And I believe that foreign businesses have seen that in Chile, we insist that our environmental standards be met and respect international standards. And that these standards don't come from the executive, but ultimately it's the communities that are actively involved in these authorization processes get to have their word to say. And that also comes to labor issues. So ultimately, in the alliance, we are going to establish standards that protect our resources, but that also enable us to ensure that business gets done in the best possible way. I'd like to add to what the Chilean ambassador said. In my presentation, I mentioned how the Canadian mining sector ultimately made other sectors more dynamic as well. There are many opportunities in the mining sector for cooperation, for example, with technology, innovation, best practices, environmental management. I'd like to specifically mention a skills development project for education and professional competencies that is given with Canada in the extractive sector. This project, as I say, is focused on professional development, and it's one of the biggest areas of cooperation between Canada and the Pacific Alliance. And very quickly, I'd like to mention with regard to your question, in Colombia we have a method for environmental management. We, of course, do understand the importance of the Canadian mining sector. Since 2005 until between 2005 and 2016, the investment from Canada was over $10 billion. So ultimately, we have an instrument that considers both the environmental and social effects.
So there's something important that's stood out for the communities being consulted. We signed an agreement on Indigenous communities, which means that we have specific commitments in terms of consulting communities ahead of time. The national government is leading a project before Congress to improve standards in the area of consultations for cost, time, methods of participation, and making things more efficient. Just very briefly, in the bilateral area, mining is very important for Mexico. 50% of foreign direct investment in mining in Mexico is from Canada. At the bilateral level, a lot is being done through the Canada-Mexico Alliance. One of the 8 working groups is on mining, and a lot of progress has been made in the area of standards and skills. We've explored the possibility of temporary workers. For the international area, for Pacific Alliance, we've talked about different disciplines, strengthening the environment and labor, all of the topics that have been discussed in the area of social skills, and it will be strengthened to ensure that all of the standards are met in these areas so that both countries are meeting the highest standards. I don't know if I may, Mr. Chair, if I may add another comment in the area of the Pacific Alliance. As you know, social responsibility is an important topic, the environment as well, and the first free trade agreement was with North America, and there was a side deal. Now with NAFTA 2, we'll have an area on labor and on the environment. The model that's existed for the past years are side deals in NAFTA. Now we have the TPP, which will be signed very shortly by the 11 countries in Chile. So the agenda has moved forward in the area of free trade. In these social areas, there's been development. So I think the Pacific Alliance, as has been done with the CPTPP, adding labor and the environment, this will be taken as a model for the alliance. But currently, it's not mandatory. It's something that's focused on in the working groups. And as I said earlier, many of the disciplines we're used to looking at with the CPTPP, NAFTA, CETA, the Mexico-Europe agreement. The Pacific Alliance is taking a little bit of time, and Canada will help it advance more quickly. Thank you.
Parliamentary Secretary Goldsmith-Jones, did you have a quick question?
I have two compliments. First of all, the Global South certainly led in including a gender chapter in trade agreement. And after Chile and Uruguay did that, Canada was very pleased to join with Chile in that. Thank you. Secondly, the work in the Colombia peace process has been very instructive for Canada's understanding of women, peace, and security, and it contributed a lot to our feminist foreign policy. So thank you for that. Minister Champagne has just appointed a Canadian ombudsperson for responsible enterprise. And I wonder if you would care to comment on the effect that that may have with regard to mining in your countries.
Yo lo que diría muy rápidamente.
Very briefly, I'd say that this was an announcement that demonstrates Canada's willingness to move forward in this area, to bring the progressive agenda to the front, and we'll be looking to provide support when it's necessary with this new position that's been created. Thank you. For Colombia's part, we're very pleased with this new position. Previously, you had a strategy for businesses in the extractive industry that operate outside of Canada's borders, and there's the counselor for corporate social responsibility in the extractive industries, and we see this as part of the evolution. There's this new position that will doubtless help us with Canadian companies and in our countries. It will help them to operate as good corporate citizens, respecting the environment and human rights, and everything that has to do with sustainability.
Very good. Very active morning and good dialogue. And I hope everybody got their points across, and hope all members of Parliament got the question and they wanted. It's as you can see with the time sheet, it's all over the place. But that's what we wanted this morning, that good dialogue and a good understanding back and forth. Unless there's something that the ambassadors or representatives want to say, we'll close this meeting.
Sí.
Presidente,
si me permite,
from Chile.
Simplemente agradecer.
Mr. Chair, if I may, I'd like to thank you for this opportunity that you've provided. I'd like to say to the members of the committee that they would be very welcome to visit us in the spring. We hope to be able to support them, for Chile's part at least, in preparing their visit, the trip they will be doing to our 4 countries. Thank you very much.
Before I close the meeting, nobody leave. We're going to take a quick picture with the ambassadors. But you have point of order, Mr. Hoback?
Yeah, and this is a formal meeting and it's good. Unfortunately, it's never long enough. But I'd strongly suggest you have an informal meeting where you serve some lobster and invite these gentlemen back, and we have a chance to get to know them even better on a more personal note.
I'll try to get the lobsters. If you can bring some good steaks from out west.
I would be glad to do that.
But you know,
I offer the Chilean wine.
You know
and you can offer the margaritas.
Maybe sometime we can all get together, and if yes, the trip to your countries is on our radar, but it may not be this spring. But we're looking forward to it, and maybe if it happens beforehand, we can get together. So,
quisiera mencionar. Oh, sorry.
Further to Mr. Holback's point, perhaps in May during the Ottawa round of negotiations, where we have great time to do that.
Okay, so we're going to continue this, but in a more informal, and we're going to have some Chilean wine with that, I hope, and berries from Chile. Okay, so any more comments?
Sí, en ese sentido.
To promote the Pacific Alliance, the 4 countries, the embassies, every year have a culinary event in Parliament, and we'd like to invite you so we can show off our culinary skills. It will be held on March 21st. We'll send you the invitations.
Good. So listen, the meeting's over, but can everybody just get a picture here with the, and then we got about 15 minutes of new business. We got to tidy up and be out of here before 2:15. Just suspend.